At Christmas dinner, his family laughed. "You're just here for the gifts." I smiled politely, hiding the truth that had already begun to fester deep inside me. But when they opened my present, the room went dead silent. Where in the world are you watching this from, and what time is it? Subscribe now, because this story won't just entertain you. It might haunt you. I never thought it would come to this, but here I am telling you this now. The quiet before the storm. That heavy weight in the air when everything in a room shifts without a single word being said. That's what it felt like. The tension, thick enough to slice through with a knife, the moment everything I'd carefully held together started to unravel. I had never been close to his family, not really. I had always been the outsider. And that Christmas, that one moment solidified it. His sister, with her perfect smile, always said the things that made everyone laugh. His mom, who had a way of making every little thing I did feel like it wasn't quite right. And then there was him, sitting across from me, looking at me like I was something he had already figured out, like I was nothing more than an accessory to his life. I don't think he even noticed the way I faded into the background, or maybe he did, and it was easier for him to pretend it didn't bother me. But it did. Every holiday, every family gathering, I was reminded of how much I didn't belong, how much I never would. I grew up in a house that was never quiet, never safe. My mother, her voice always sharp, like knives cutting through everything. I could never be what she wanted me to be. I could never be perfect, never live up to the expectations that she set without ever telling me what they were. And yet I tried. God, I tried so hard. I became who she wanted me to be, all the while dying a little inside. I didn't know what it was like to just be seen, to be wanted for who I really was. So I kept that part of me hidden, buried deep, where even I couldn't find it. I thought maybe things would be different with him. Maybe he'd be the one who saw me, really saw me. But I was wrong. Oh, how wrong I was. The gifts. That damn gift. I can't even remember the smile I wore. The one that everyone thought was polite. I remember feeling like it wasn't enough, like nothing would ever be enough. I wanted to scream, to break down right there at the table, to throw that damn box in his face and tell them all what I had spent months, years trying to hide. But instead I sat there silent, while they all stared at the gift I had given him, an envelope. It wasn't big, it wasn't shiny, it wasn't wrapped in some extravagant way. It was simple. It was everything I had left of myself. And it meant nothing to them. I saw the way they all looked at it, then looked at me with those blank stares, those condescending smiles that told me everything I needed to know. They didn't care. They never would. But it wasn't the silence that followed that shook me. It wasn't the forced smiles or the awkward coughs. It was his face. The look on his face when he opened that envelope and saw what was inside. The gift that I had poured so much of myself into. The one that carried every ounce of love I could give. The one that, in my heart, meant more than anything I could have wrapped in paper. He looked at it, his face unreadable for a split second before it shifted. That brief flash of confusion, of disappointment, that flickered in his eyes before he quickly hid it. He didn't even look at me. Not once. And that's when I knew. He wasn't just a reflection of my pain. He was the cause of it. He had never seen me. Not really. He'd never really wanted to. I wasn't part of his perfect world. Not even close. I realized then that the laughter in his family, the jokes at my expense, the unspoken weight of their expectations, all of it. It wasn't just about me being different. It was about me being invisible, unimportant, a ghost in their lives. And yet I stayed. I smiled. I nodded along with them, trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine. But the silence after that moment was unbearable. That quiet, thick with everything unsaid, everything hidden. I could feel it closing in on me. His mother's eyes on me, sharp as daggers, always judging, always looking for a reason to push me away. His sister's fake smile, the one that said she had already written me off, already judged me. And him sitting there silent, pretending to care. But the truth was clearer now than ever. I was nothing more than a stranger in a house full of people who didn't even try to know me. I'd never be good enough for them. And I had never been good enough for him. But what hurt more was the realization that I was still trying. Still hoping that maybe, just maybe, one day they'd see me. One day he would. But no. The truth was too loud, too clear. I wasn't the one they needed. And I wasn't the one they'd ever choose. The silence stretched on, and then I saw it. His phone buzzed, a text message. He glanced at it quickly, his face tightening for just a moment, before he put it back down, his eyes never meeting mine. That moment, that brief, subtle moment of discomfort, was all I needed. I knew something was wrong. Something bigger than what I had thought. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it deep in my bones. This wasn't over. No, this was just the beginning. I couldn't stop replaying that moment over and over in my head. The look on his face when he opened my gift, the shock, the disappointment, the instant shift that came with it. It was like everything that had been building up to that point came crashing down on me in one singular instant, and I didn't even know how to react anymore. There was no anger, no sadness, just this sinking, hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. I should have known. I should have seen it coming. It wasn't just that he didn't care, it was that he never had. Not really. Not in the way I needed him to. And yet there. I was still hoping, still clinging to the idea that something might change. But what was worse than the silence in the room after my gift was opened was the realization that this silence wasn't just about the gift. It was about everything that had come before. All the moments when I had tried so hard to fit into his world, to be someone I wasn't just for a shred of his approval. It was all a lie. All of it. I spent the next few days feeling numb, disconnected from everything around me. The house felt colder, emptier. The laughter I had once tried so hard to fit into now sounded hollow, fake. I began to wonder, was I always this invisible? Did I ever matter to any of them? Or was I just a part of their lives, a filler, someone who existed in the background because it was easier to ignore than acknowledge? I stopped trying to force myself into their mold. I stopped going to the family dinners, stopped pretending to care about the little things they did that they always thought were so important. The lies piled up, little by little, and I began to peel back the layers, but each truth I uncovered made me question more and more about who I was, about who they were. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. It was the fact that I didn't know who I could trust anymore. I thought I knew these people, but they were all wearing masks and I was too blind to see it. And then there was my mother. My sweet, cruel mother. It had always been her words, her expectations that shaped who I was, who I thought I was. I was never enough for her. I could never make her proud, never do things the way she wanted me to. I lived in that shadow my entire life, and now it was suffocating me. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, but I still had the letters. The letters she used to send me, filled with words that cut like knives, telling me everything I was doing wrong, how I wasn't living up to her vision of who I should be. They were all buried at the bottom of a drawer, but I had never dared to throw them away. I opened one of them one night, the one from the year before, and read her words. "You'll never be good enough. You're just like your father. That's why he left." I remember staring at the paper, the ink blurring in front of my eyes. How had I missed this? I had spent so many years trying to prove something to her, to make her proud, but it was all for nothing. Nothing I did would ever be enough. But maybe it wasn't just my mother who had been holding me back. Maybe it was me too. Maybe I had been blind all along. I remember sitting there, in the silence of my apartment, holding that letter, thinking about the past 5 years, about how I had given up so much of myself to please them, to fit into their world. All the while I had neglected the most important person, me. And then when I least expected it, a text came through, one I hadn't seen in months. It was from an old friend, someone I had known before all of this, someone I thought I could trust. The message was simple. "I think you need to know something about him. You're not the only one." That was all it said. It hit me like a slap in the face and I froze, staring at the screen for what felt like forever. What did it mean? Was it about him? About us? What was I missing? I thought about calling back, asking for answers, but something told me to wait. I couldn't rush into it, couldn't let my emotions take over. So I stayed silent. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls around me were closing in. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that nothing in my life was as it seemed. I had spent years pretending, living a lie, and now I was faced with the ugly truth. But even then I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop searching for the truth, for the answers that were buried so deep. I started digging through old conversations, old memories, things I thought I had buried along with my past. And that's when I heard it, something I never thought I would hear. His voice from 5 years ago, speaking to someone else. He was talking about me, but not in the way I thought. Not with love, not with care. It was cold, calculated. "She'll never leave. She's too soft. I can control her. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I couldn't breathe. The walls I had carefully built around myself came crashing down in an instant. I had been nothing more than a pawn, a tool in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I thought he loved me. I thought we had something real. But it was all part of his plan, a plan I was too blind to see. The tears came then, not of sadness but of rage. Rage at myself for not seeing it, for not understanding the game I was in. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I didn't. I kept it all inside, letting the anger simmer. And that's when everything began to unravel. I realized that I was never going to be the person they wanted me to be. I was never going to fit into their perfect world. I was never going to be enough. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop trying. The next day he called. He was still pretending. His voice so sweet, so charming, so full of lies. But I didn't buy it anymore. I knew what he was. I knew what he had done. And I was done. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But something had shifted. Something inside me had snapped. And it was the beginning of something new. Something dark. Something dangerous. I was done being the victim. And whatever was coming next, I wasn't afraid anymore. And that's when I stopped being afraid. The truth had seeped in slowly like a poison, taking root deep inside me. I could no longer deny what I had been avoiding all these years. The ugly, twisted reality that had always been just out of reach, hidden behind layers of half-truths, lies, and the mask I had worn to keep it all together. It wasn't just him. It was everyone. I had built my entire life around this idea that I was the problem, that I was the one who wasn't enough, but now I could see it for what it was: manipulation, control, betrayal. I wasn't the victim. I was the pawn. And now I was done being played. The shift in me was subtle at first, but it grew. I started to pull away from everything, retreating into myself like a spider weaving a web. I became more focused, more calculated. Every moment, every conversation, every glance was part of the plan. I watched them all: my mother, my father, the friends I thought I could trust, the ones who had always been just a little too perfect, too eager to offer advice or support. Their faces had always been masks, but now I saw the cracks. I heard the whispers when I thought I wasn't listening, the words that slipped through their teeth in moments of weakness. I knew now that I couldn't trust anyone, that everyone had been in on it, each playing their part in this grand charade. But what hit hardest was when I realized that my mother had known. She had always known what he was doing to me. She had always known, and yet she had let it happen. All those years of her telling me how strong I was, how I needed to stop being so naive, it had been nothing but a setup. She never wanted me to be strong. She wanted me to be dependent. She wanted me to need her, to need all of them. But now I understood. I understood her cruelty, her coldness. She had spent my whole life shaping me into a version of herself, and I had been too blind to see it. And when I went back through those old letters, I saw the pattern, the lies she told me, the truth she buried. The more I read, the more I realized just how deeply rooted her control went. It wasn't just about me, it was about the entire family. We were all part of her web, all caught in her web of lies. The worst part was how she would twist everything, how she would make me feel like I was the one who had failed, the one who wasn't living up to her standards. And yet, now I was the one who had the power. I wasn't going to be a pawn anymore. I was going to be the queen. The confrontation came when I least expected it, but it was inevitable. It was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when the lies couldn't hold anymore. When the cracks in their perfect facade finally broke wide open. He came to me thinking I was still the same. His voice soft and soothing like it always had been. But this time I didn't fall for it. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the way he was trying to manipulate me into believing that it was all just a mistake, that he hadn't meant any of it. But I saw right through him. I had seen his true colors for months now, and I wasn't going to let him play me anymore. I stood there, silent, letting him talk, watching him twist and turn, trying to pull me back into his world. He didn't realize that I had already stepped out of it. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, almost too calm, and it felt like the words were coming from a place I didn't even recognize. You think I don't know what you've been doing? All this time you've been lying to me, using me, and you think I'm just going to let you get away with it? The look on his face was priceless, like a deer caught in headlights. For the first time I felt no guilt, no hesitation, just this strange, cold detachment. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of anyone. He stammered, his words stumbling over each other, trying to find a way to fix it, to take it all back. But it was too late. I had already made my decision. And as I walked away from him, the weight of what I was about to do settled deep into my chest. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate my life. Not anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something huge. The pieces were falling into place one by one. There were secrets I still hadn't uncovered, truths I hadn't fully grasped, but I could feel them, just out of reach, waiting to be revealed. I started digging again, searching for anything that could give me the upper hand. And that's when I found it, a letter, hidden deep in the back of a drawer, one I hadn't seen before. It was from my father, written years ago before he left. It wasn't just a goodbye letter, it was a confession. He had known everything. He had known what they were doing to me, and he had left anyway. The words on the page were sharp, cutting through the silence in my mind, and as I read them, I could feel the weight of betrayal press down on me. But the worst part? He had written it to me as if I would ever find it, as if he had always known I would be the one to figure it out. You deserve better, the letter said. But you need to let go of them. Let go of all of them. They will never let you be free. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew it was the key to everything. I wasn't going to stop until I had all the answers. I wasn't going to stop until I had my revenge. And as I sat there in the quiet of my room, the pieces of my life falling into place, I felt a shift. The person I had been, the person they thought they knew, was gone. The woman who had been scared, unsure, and alone was gone. In her place stood someone colder, someone stronger, someone who was done playing their game. And as I looked at the phone on my desk, I realized that it was time to make my move. I didn't know where this would take me, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. And if you stayed this long, you already know this wasn't just a story. This was a warning. Subscribe. And remember me. The first strike felt almost anticlimactic, like a release, but I had learned by then that the slow burn always delivers the deepest scars. I had spent months, no years, preparing for this moment, and now it was here, a culmination of every little betrayal, every ounce of pain, every lie that had been woven into the fabric of my life. Didn't come with the fury I had expected, the boiling rage that I thought would consume me. Instead, it was calm, almost too calm, like I had finally detached from all of it, like I had become a spectator in my own story. I looked at the phone one last time before I hit send. The message was clear, cold, no room for negotiation. Meet me tonight. Alone. We'll talk. The we was deliberate. It was never about us. It was always about me, the one left standing after everything had burned to the ground. I had already arranged everything, every last detail. The meeting place was the old house, the one they had promised would always be mine, the one I had left behind to escape the suffocating air of expectations. But now it was the perfect stage for everything to come full circle. When he showed up looking so familiar, so sure of himself, I felt nothing. It was like looking at a stranger. The years of manipulation, of pretending to be the victim, the silent suffering, it had all boiled down to this, one final moment to reclaim my life. You think you can just walk back into my life after everything? I said, my voice colder than I had ever imagined it could be. You think you still have power over me? He faltered. The bravado he wore so easily before cracked, just for a moment, and I saw the vulnerability that had always been there, buried beneath his confident mask. For the first time, I saw him for what he really was. A scared little boy who had built his empire on lies, deceit, and the manipulation of everyone around him, including me. But it didn't matter anymore. You don't get to control me anymore. I continued, each word hitting like a blow. Not your lies, not your expectations, not your demands. I'm done. He opened his mouth to say something, but I silenced him with a single gesture, a raised hand, the last semblance of civility I would ever offer him. The final blow came when I handed him the letter. The confession he had written, the one from all those years ago, the one that had burned into my brain. This, I said, is what you wanted me to forget. But I remember everything now. His face turned pale as he read the words, and I could see the regret, the panic, the realization that everything was slipping away from him. But I was beyond redemption. I had already forgiven myself long before he could offer any excuse. As he crumpled the letter in his hand, I watched his facade shatter, and for the first time I felt a strange sense of relief. The power had always been mine, I just hadn't known how to take it until now. But the real twist, the one I hadn't seen coming, didn't reveal itself until after the confrontation, when the dust had settled and the weight of what I had done hung in the air like a thick fog. It wasn't the revenge that shattered me, it was the realization that I had become him, the person I had despised all these years, the one I had sworn never to become. The cold, calculating, manipulative version of myself that had found a way to destroy everything in her path for the sake of control. As I walked away from the wreckage I had caused, I felt a strange emptiness, a hollowness that I couldn't shake. The man who had betrayed me was gone, but what was left of me? What had I become? There was no joy in winning this battle, no satisfaction in the destruction I had caused. It was as if the price of revenge was a piece of my soul that I had willingly traded, and I wasn't sure if I had gained anything at all. But then, standing there in the empty street, I realized that there was no going back. I couldn't unsee what I had seen, couldn't undo the decisions that had led me here. The moment I had crossed that line, I knew I had left my old self behind, and I wasn't sure if I could ever return to the person I had been. My world had become this cold, fractured, broken, and I wasn't sure if I could piece it together again. And as the night stretched on, I felt it, the weight of the silence, the echoes of everything that had happened, the people I had lost, the pieces of myself I had sacrificed. I had won, but at what cost? The road ahead was uncertain, and I didn't know what it would hold. But in that moment, as I stood there, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud, I knew one thing for sure. I would never be afraid again. The fear had been what had held me back for so long, what had kept me locked in that prison of my own making. But now there was no fear. There was only the emptiness, and the bitter taste of what it meant to be free. I turned my back to the world I had known, the people who had made me who I was, and walked away. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking toward something, not away from it. And as I walked into the darkness, the words that had haunted me for so long echoed in my mind. You will never be free. They were wrong. I was free. At least I thought I was. But freedom isn't always what it seems. Sometimes it's just another word for nothing left to lose. The final twist came when I checked the phone. The last message had been from my mother, simple and terrifying in its implications. You've gone too far. There's no coming back from this. That's when I understood. The game was never just between me and him. It was always bigger than that. And now I was no longer the puppet. I was the one holding the strings,